Okay, so live on Facebook, let's see. To anybody who might be jumping on with us through Zoom, we are going to try to live stream on Facebook. We're down the staff member who normally does this, but we're going to see if I can do it. Just pressing continue on everything. Says it's preparing to live stream. Says it's preparing to live stream. There we go. You heard me twice. Going back to look at this screen. Okay, we have a few people jumping on with us. We're just going to give it a minute or two before we get started. We are also live streaming on Facebook. It's preparing to live stream. There we go. You heard me twice. Going back to look at this. Can you hear me, Daniel, now?
I can.
Okay. I was worried that I completely muted myself when I muted. Okay, so I think we're in good shape now. We'll wait another minute or two and see if we pick up another person or two. I also have music playing too loud in my background. Going to wait one more minute and then we'll do our introductions. We are missing Jillian tonight. I think some of you who regularly do museum programs know that Jillian McMaster moved on to another position. We're really excited for her, but until we fill our marketing position, Daniel and I are wearing a lot more hats and doing more things. Okay, everybody, I think we'll get started. Not a lot in the way of introductions tonight. Hi, thanks for joining us for this evening's, they're always special editions of Let's Talk Art. We always manage to come up with some reason they're special. And tonight it's special because we are celebrating the museum's 90th birthday. I've been using the word birthday instead of anniversary because I've been trying to make it feel kind of light and celebratory. We had a birthday party last week. If it weren't for COVID, we might have been playing pin the tail on the donkey or pin the tail on the cow. We have many cow paintings in the collection. So tonight we are expanding on what I want to think of as a whole year of celebrating the history of the museum, the legacy of the founders, the excitement of our future. So I think it's going to be really fun tonight. Daniel, as always, does the heavy lifting with these, and he has put together a really great PowerPoint that we'll go through. Just a few museum announcements. We packed up the Baroque exhibition this week. That was such an exciting time for us. We're in the midst of transforming those galleries so that we can hang the Secret Paris of the 1930s, Vintage Photographs by Brassai, which is also going to be a very different but wonderful exhibition, immersing us into the life of Paris between the wars. And also, Daniel has been working on rehanging the Kirstein Gallery, which is usually our Ashcan to abstraction room, with some changes because we deinstalled it for the Baroque show, and why put things back the same way twice? So he's been working on that. We still have Joshua Johnson on view until January 23rd with some new programs in the work for that as it has been extended. And we have the annual museum treasure sale coming up once again in an online auction format between November 1st and November 15th. So we have a lot going on. As the days get shorter, you're going to see the windows behind me probably start to get dark. The air is getting cooler, but everything is actually amping up for us. As I said last time, I think if you want to know more about me, I'm Sarah Hall. I'm the director of the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts, or Daniel Fulco, who is our Agneta M. Stein Schreiber curator. You can always go onto our YouTube page and find the very first Let's Talk Art, where we do talk a lot about ourselves and our background and the path that led us to the museum. So now I guess tonight we're going to trace the museum's path that meandered along until it arrived at us. So Daniel, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Yes, and we've got some exciting and very interesting stories to share with you tonight. And on the occasion of our 90th birthday. Just bear with me one moment. I'm going to share my screen with you. And I'm going to see some very intriguing aspects of the museum's history. We're going to take it all the way back to the beginning and in this edition, and then we're going to bring it up to the present day and highlighting some of the achievements of various people involved in it. But we must begin with our founders, who are Anna Brew and William Singer, who met one another back in the late 19th century. And the story, we'll get into Anna in a moment, but they were married in Hagerstown. Anna was from Hagerstown and William was from Pittsburgh. So our entire narrative this evening really begins with William Singer. And he was born in Pittsburgh. And Sarah, feel free to jump in here with all of your inside knowledge of Pittsburgh as we go through a couple of these slides.
I'll
go ahead.
I applied for a position, a year and a half or more, almost 2 years ago now, and started researching the Singers and doing all the good homework you're supposed to do if you're serious about a job interview process. I did explore the Pittsburgh connections for sure, and discovered that some people I knew were actually descendants of the family. Found out that, I was at the Frick in Pittsburgh, and, found out that in fact, Anna Singer had been at parties with Helen Clay Frick. They were both on the guest list, and also that the Frick family at least gave a wedding gift. I don't think they came to the wedding in Hagerstown, which actually, if you could see out the windows behind me, there's a building, and then there's the church they were married at. So when I walked to work, I passed the church where William and Anna were married. And I love that picture that you used, Daniel. That sweet photograph, which shows how affectionate they were. And really, I think they shared so many interests and really built a terrific life together and a great museum. So you can go back and go to the other slide where we have some of William Singer's painting. Well, George Hetzel is there, and of course he's a Pittsburgh-based scalp level artist who the first documented painting purchase of Henry Clay Frick's is a George Hetzel. So the whole beginning of the Frick collection begins with this Dusseldorf-trained artist who was painting in this area, outside of Pittsburgh with other artists as well. And these would have been people that would have been in the Singers' circle. They would have certainly known the scalp level painters. And as a young boy interested in art, apparently Billy, just drew and painted constantly and was very encouraged by his mother. And I read somewhere, Daniel, did you see this? That his dad, although his dad discouraged him and wanted him to be a businessman, that his dad did sort of do some Sunday painting?
I believe that's correct. I think he was a sometime amateur artist.
So
yes,
clearly steeped in creative pursuits as a young boy. I read two different things, and you can correct me on this, Daniel, but I have read that William Singer was born on Center Avenue in Pittsburgh, but then I read that he was born in Ligonier. So that was in Robert Pressel. What's his last name? Robert
Pressler.
Yeah, Pressler. In one of his essays, he says Ligonier instead of on Center Avenue. And I thought, well, that's interesting. But the family lived, their main residence was Allegheny City, the north side of Pittsburgh. And then they built a very grand summer home out in Sewickley Heights. which was very fashionable at the time. These are great, great images.
And here we go. Because you mentioned the Sewickley Heights. Here's a photograph of that grand residence, Edge Hill Manor.
It's still there, and in fact, not too long ago, there was a feature in the newspaper about the current owners and things they had done. There's an in-ground pool somewhere, somewhere on the state now. But yeah, really wonderful place. And Sewickley is a really beautiful area, which has its own historical society because they're very conscious of the legacy of this kind of, industrialist summer retreat. And I think for many families, it became their actual homes rather than summer homes.
And interestingly, I think they had another, William Singer Sr., William's father, had another home at Hillcrest here. And that was another one, I guess, that they would go to here. They found in a historic photo. So I'm not exactly sure where Hillcrest was or if it's still standing.
I have some recollection of them having had a place in Rhode Island, but I could be wrong. And the terrible story that the dad was always afraid of cars, but then dies in an automobile accident or with injuries sustained from an automobile accident. So sad story. And there is the loving cup that the Frick family gave to the Singers on the occasion of their wedding in 1895, I think, right, Daniel? The wedding.
I believe it was, yes.
That there are apparently biblical scenes of love and devotion on that, but it's really difficult to see. And that is, I believe, in the collection of the Singer-Laren Museum.
I believe it is. And then we have over here, actually, a photo of many of the prominent Pittsburghers of that time, the industrialists like Henry Clay Frick. And also here is William Singer, Henry Singer Jr.'s father, William Singer Sr. And there are lots of prominent people here. You've got Mr. Schwab, sorry about the resolution there, Charles Schwab. You have Phipps here. I think that's another big Pittsburgh family.
The story is a very popular place.
Yes. Miller, there are a number in here, Hunter, and I think we've got a lot of prominent Pittsburgh industrialists all shown in these oval photographs.
I think I read William Henry Singer's bios, of the period, and it was, they're so fun because it's very, very inflated prose, which talked about, his handsome visage, his genial personality, but yet he was so incredibly decisive. He could make a decision very readily, but with good humor always, and very full of praise for his business acumen and his kindness.
So I'm just going to go back for a moment and quickly point out, Sarah was talking there about the scalp level artists. And what's interesting is William Singer, I think he might have known, at least briefly, George Hetzel. And we've got here a very early watercolor that William did when he was quite young, probably a teenager. And he used to make sketching trips to the Laurel Highlands, which are southeast of Pittsburgh. It's today where the Fallingwater House is built by the famous Kaufman family. So he would make trips there in the summertime and get away from all that pollution back in the city. But his grounding influences, his formative period would have been looking at landscapes like George Hetzel's.
That's a good point. And I should say Laurel Highlands is named for mountain laurel, wild rhododendron, and it is worth going in the spring if you can, when they're in bloom. And every once in a while you can see in a Hetzel painting a little clump of mountain laurel blooming, because that is what the area is known for. I didn't see any in that one, but sometimes you see a little pink splotch or two.
Yes. And keep this in mind that what William grew up with was seeing all of this pollution from this historic photo of Pittsburgh in about 1905. And later that's going to sort of drive him and inspire him to get as far away as he can from the industrial cityscape.
It's true. But I was thinking also of how he loved Norway's mountains and fjords, which of course you could equate geographically, at least Pittsburgh is a very hilly town. If you live in Pittsburgh, other places can seem very flat afterwards.
Yes, I think I read somewhere that he wrote or told or said aloud that he didn't have much love for going back to Pittsburgh after he had found both the Netherlands and particularly Norway. And that's very telling and quite ironic because he didn't come back to the U.S., Mr. Singer, after he moved abroad. He left that task to his wife, Anna, which is quite interesting. So she maintained the relationships with the museum. And William just really fell in love with Europe. But he still maintained ties to Pittsburgh even after he left town, exhibiting in the Carnegie International Exhibitions, for example. And then afterwards, we'll get to a slide. He also continued to show Pittsburgh galleries examples of his early work. So he has a very interesting life. And then there's also a bit of Pittsburgh history here that is interesting about his uncle, John Singer, and the house of John Singer that still remains in Pittsburgh today in the Wilkinsburg district.
Yeah, this is so terrific. It was an Airbnb for a while, and I think that it's been suspended, probably related to the pandemic, that they're not renting right now. But I love that picture top left where you see there was a chapel. So you have this incredible, Gothic revival building with its own little private chapel, and apparently, also orchards, a lake, a boathouse. For anybody who has not ever heard of this before, imagining this kind of estate in Wilkinsburg and built during the Civil War. So this is our founder, William Henry Singer's uncle, his dad's brother, John. And really, he's the man who founds the family iron and then steel industry. And it becomes, I think it's around 1854, it becomes Singer Nimick, the company. And William Henry Singer Sr. Goes to work at that company with his older brother. But this is just an incredibly spectacular place. And the chapel, I guess, burnt a while ago, but the house is there and has been had a lot of restoration done to it in order to have it be an Airbnb. So hopefully one day you can come to Pittsburgh and you can stay here.
Yes, and it certainly looks spectacular. Oh my goodness.
That tracery is really beautiful.
Yes, this is an example of
every room had a different marble theme, a different color marble with a different theme, and he brought craftsmen in from all over to do the work. Everything had to be hand carved, and really kind of I was reading, there's a architectural historian from Pittsburgh, now deceased, James Van Trump, who talks about him being the only person in Pittsburgh alive at the time with the kind of weird, romantic, medieval sensibility to build a house like this, that nobody else would have built a house like that. It's wild.
It certainly is. And residences like this done in that Civil War era, high Victorian Gothic revival style are not that many remaining, in particularly in this restored condition. So it was really quite stunning that it's still around.
Mm-hmm. I wish it was all still around. Orchards and boathouses and chapels, but yeah, at least the main house is still there.
So that's a bit about the Singer family heritage still remaining in Pittsburgh. And as we mentioned before, Anna Singer is born in Hagerstown. Here's a photograph from the Singer's wedding in the 1890s. Her house that she lived in as a child is still standing on Dunn Irvin Drive, which is across from City Park. You can walk there from the museum if you ever want.
We have been picking up, and hopefully we will do it at some point, the idea of trading trips with Pittsburgh, partnering with folks that I know in Pittsburgh and doing, Singer-based themed kind of tour through Pittsburgh, and then also doing the same thing here in Hagerstown.
And so as the story goes, what happened was in 1907, 1908, there is a very famous dinner that happens in New York City, and it's actually posted in the, the dinner was in Pittsburgh, but it's posted in the New York Times at the time, where each child of William Singer Sr. receives $4 million at this supper. And so the total is $16 million. And it's a very interesting headline here. And this is what allows William Singer to devote his life to painting works like the one you see here, the Village of Norway. $4 million apiece for dinner guests, favors, they're calling them, at the wedding feast. And it's quite something.
Yeah, calling it a parent favor is pretty funny.
Exactly. In today's money, this would be a fortune. And it's part of this gift that William receives that makes possible some years later in the late 1920s, specifically 1928, 29, and 30, to build the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts in Hagerstown. And as I mentioned before, William Singer continues to maintain connections, though, to Pittsburgh. He exhibits at a gallery that was called J.J. Gillespie and Company. I don't know if you've heard of it, Sarah.
Absolutely, yeah. And Frick was buying things from J.J. Gillespie and having things framed, and sometimes they were coming in the house and helping him move paintings. So, yeah, very prominent gallery.
Yes. And the kind of subjects you would have seen in this exhibition from 1908, William has now come into that fortune, by the way, and getting ready to move with Anna over to the Netherlands. And then after that, Norway, would have been paintings like this, Beach at Monhegan. And William Singer spent time abroad as well as at home, particularly at the Old Lyme Artist Colony, but also up in Maine at Monhegan Island, where he painted these beautiful early pictures like this of beach scenes. And so he would have sent works like this to back for this exhibition. And here's a nice little quotation here in which he had stated, until 1901, this was later in life, when I started for Paris, I existed only. From that time, a chance was given to me to live. And it's this experience of going abroad, of seeing Europe, that he becomes really attracted to the idea of staying there and painting freely. So he was lucky enough, fortunate enough to have the means to be able to realize this dream. But there are changes from his early works like this, where there's sort of this luminescence. He's very much painting in an impressionist style at this time, and very bright light, almost in the manner of the French Impressionists. And then as time goes on, his works start to evolve into what we would want to call reminiscent of, for example, Georges Seurat, a pointillist style like you see in the Village of Olden, which comes from a bit later. This is, I believe, 1931. So his style starts to take on the use of using those dots applied to the canvas and building that up to create these patterns of color, but also to achieve remarkable juxtapositions of light and also shade.
So I'm going to ask you one thing. And sorry, I'm getting this info. I'm not quite sure why. But so that you mentioned, I have read Daniel's weekend art text that is going to go out one of these Saturdays, and he talks about the square format being popular at this time. And of course, if you are sending a document to your printer, you have a choice, right, of portrait or landscape. So landscape is associated with horizontal because you're kind of looking at this slice of land and sky, and a horizontal format maybe is more logical for that. We just had a colleague from the National Gallery and looking at our Courbet, which you'll see later, and she was talking about how Courbet loved this kind of almost square format as well. So I don't know if you have anything to add about like why was a square format becoming popular, or if there's any way to explain it.
I would actually need to explore that more, Sarah, to find out exactly why. It might have had something to do with the display or the placement of these works in different patrons' houses. Maybe it had to do with somehow decorating or fitting them in a sort of a unified manner into an interior. That would be one of my guesses.
That would be exactly the guess I would make. I was thinking about our museum, sort of thinking about our museum as a whole and the way the museum feels. And of course, I think one of the reasons people respond to us and our collections so much, and when you walk in the Singer Gallery, which is filled with work by William Henry Singer and his friends and the people and the things they collected, it's because they were collecting for their life, right? When museums buy things, they are often looking for the grandest, most sophisticated, most technically advanced. Museums often, are looking for a coup for their collection, which is not always the same thing you'd want to live with. And I think that this art that is meant for domestic pleasure, gives pleasure in a way, and that may be part of the reason why our collection connects with people so well.
Definitely. And what happens is that the Singers will, as I mentioned, they'll move over to Europe, and they're going to buy a house in a place called Blaricum, which is near Lauren. That's where our sister museum is located. It's called Singer Lauren. However, Singer Lauren was founded in 1956, so some years after us. And they're going to have different homes. They're going to move around a bit, but they go between specifically Lauren, which is outside of Amsterdam, and then also this village of Olden, where they build a house called Dalheim, and it has a studio connected to it. But they keep an apartment in Paris, and William is exhibiting there actively for a good portion of his career. While they're in Lauren, what happens is William and Anna befriend a number of artists with the Lauren Artist Colony. It's sometimes called the Lauren School. And among their friends included artists like Anton Mauve. And here's one of William's paintings that he did near Lauren. And you can see how he's influenced by people like Anton Mauve, but also another artist up here named Joseph Israels. This landscape, I believe, is on view in our Singer Gallery. And these were who their friends were when they were staying in the Netherlands. We're going to hit on some of these other artists too. This looks like a Max Liebermann. Yes, Max Liebermann was a German impressionist, but he also spent time in Paris, if my memory serves me right. So the Singers are surrounded by artists of different nationalities, but who are coming together either in the Netherlands or in Paris, and they're exhibiting together. So they have a very interesting milieu. And William's going to go on and depict, particularly, he's going to fall in love with the Norwegian countryside the closer we get to his death, which is in 1943. So he really begins to focus exclusively on the Norwegian landscape. And as we mentioned before, our museum opens its doors in 1932. It's founded officially in 1928 at a dinner in New York City, actually. So the founding occurs just before the stock market crash. And as a result of that, because they had it all in the works, they had an architect lined up with Hyde and Shepard, they were able to achieve this despite the Depression. And here we have a photograph of the different county officials who came with board members. This is on opening day way back in 1931, this was just a couple of weeks ago to the date. Here is when the museum was featured on the cover of the April 10, 1932 Baltimore Sun, recognizing at that time our brand new museum, which had on view paintings by William Singer and also the sculptures that they gave. The Singers give 100 works of art to the museum, including pieces like this one called Fugit Amor, or Fleeting or Fleeing Love by Rodin, and then also a group of drawings by William. The paintings are going to come a bit later.
I love that headline.
Yes, isn't it a great one?
Worthy of much larger city. I say that all of the time. We get told all the time how surprised people are to find us and to find such a really wonderful museum. It's worthy is a funny word, because aren't we all worthy of wonderful museums, regardless of where we live? But I say that what we do, what we have and what we do is on par with the kinds of activities and services you would find in a larger city, for sure. Worthy, I have issues with, but.
Yes. And in that word at the time, you can detect the element of, what's the word, surprise, or being a bit stunned to find the museum there at the time. So, yes. And here's what the museum looked like. This photograph is from 1935. And you can see at that time, it was only the sculpture court, as they called it then, or the gallery for tall works. Today, that's the Schreiber Gallery. And then what's today the Kirstein Gallery and the Smith Gallery. The entrance to the museum was on the other side. There's the rotunda without a sculpture. We're going to talk about that after. And while we did have a first director, a woman named Jean Lucas, she was not employed by the museum for very long at all. So the director who gets more credit, who was there longer, is Richard Medford, who serves as director from 1932 to 1940. And under him, the museum begins to pick up steam and exhibit all kinds of works of art. Under his tenure, we see exhibitions traveled from the then new Museum of Modern Art, and also the launching of our very well-known Cumberland Valley and Cumberland Valley Artists and Photographers exhibitions. Now, I had mentioned before the donation of 100 founding works of art. Included in those works are pieces by Rodin. Here's a painting called Old House Gloucester from 1895 by Childe Hassam, who was another acquaintance of the Singers, whom they met at the Old Lyme Artists Colony in the early 1900s, and another highlight of this original gift, the Gustave Courbet. And I got some more detailed slides here to show you. The Singers really loved Rodin's sculptures. And the provenance of Fugit Amor, or Fugitive Love, is fabulous because it actually was a duplicate of the bronze that they still have today that's in the Rodin Museum in Paris. So Anna Singer actually purchased it directly from the Rodin Museum back in sometime during the 1920s. So a number of our Rodins have really outstanding provenance. And the work this is one of my favorites that we have in the museum. It was also conceived and executed as a marble. And here you can see a work that is likely preparatory here that's in the Museo Sumaya in Mexico City today. And you can see the resemblance between the marble. There's this tremendous tactility that Rodin carries into the bronze itself. And the work is actually inspired by part of Dante Alighieri's Inferno, and specifically the love affair that Francesca da Rimini has with Paolo Malatesta. So he's looking for inspiration from Renaissance literature and late Gothic Renaissance literature here with Dante Alighieri. And very interestingly, this sculpture is actually depicted on the right-hand side, sort of it's merged into this frieze over here in Rodin's, one of his magnum opus called The Gates of Hell. This is the version that's at the Kunsthaus in Zurich. You can also see it at the Rodin Museum in Philadelphia, a bit closer to home. So this is really a huge work that Rodin did. And some of his very recognizable works, like Fugit Amor, can be found within this grand piece that took him almost his entire lifetime to produce, from 1885 to 1917. You'll find The Thinker in there as well as another famous one. So the Singers have a love for French art, but also the people they met, like Childe Hassam, the renowned American impressionist, who really is very well known for doing these paintings with bright color and reflected sunlight that bathes, that imbues the entire composition. And if you have a chance to see this in person in our Singer Gallery, it's always interesting to sort of focus in on it, and you can see a woman and a child who almost emerge with the house here on the North Shore of Massachusetts, Gloucester being up northeast of Boston. And he sort of hides them in the composition. They blend together with those brushstrokes so beautifully. And this is a stunning work. It was likely a gift from Hassam directly to the Singers. Here's another one called Church at Old Lyme, and I should point this out that it's in the Albright Knox Gallery in Buffalo. Did you ever happen to see it, Sarah, this one?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. Sarah can tell you a bit more about Buffalo. And we have another work later in the presentation tonight that relates to that as well. But Hassam loved to depict the colors of the different seasons, whether it was summer here at the Gloucester or here with the church at Old Lyme, Connecticut.
You can't really overstate how important Hassam was at the time. I think he showed at the Carnegie Annual over 70 times, or over 70 works in X number of years. I mean, he was just very, very dominating in terms of American Impressionism.
And here we come to another really fabulous artist. As Sarah mentioned before, we recently had some colleagues from the National Gallery visit us, and they remarked on the very high quality of our Courbet, a landscape that the artist created when he went on it's based upon his trips that he made to his hometown of Ornans, which is in southeast France, not far from Switzerland, in a province called Franche-Comté. And he would go deep into the woods, Courbet, and make sketches of this place called the Puy Noir, or translated to English, Black Well, and the stream that came out of this mountain source. They're just so beautiful. They're very hard to sort of follow because he's built up the contrast of these areas of light and dark within the composition. I'm very fond of these landscapes.
Well, Courbet is one of my favorite artists in general. It's a big personality and an interesting character. And I always like talking, he's known as a realist, but then there are people who, look at his paintings and say, well, they don't look real, but it's about painting the truth, or painting Courbet's truth. He's really wielding his tools in a particular way with a particular purpose. And I loved looking at that painting the other day together, because he's not painting on the spot. He's working from what he knows of this area that he has visited, but it's all about enjoying the material and kind of showing off what he can do with paint. And it is really beautiful.
Yes. And I quickly bring in his very famous work called The Painter's Studio, which was a reflection on his artistic creation to that point here in 1855. Unfortunately, this painting was not accepted for the Universal Exposition at the time. But Courbet, you can see how much he really loved the landscape. He's in the center of it, and he's painting his native Franche-Comté countryside. And I think that's really interesting to point that out.
Well, and what an ego.
Oh, yes.
But hard, kind of irresistible at the same time.
That's right. His political leanings at the time were very leftist. They were basically communist. They were socialist, which made him a rebel in his day.
Well, and he spent some time in jail, and I love the fact that while he was in jail, he would paint still lifes from the fruit and that his sisters would bring him. If I had had a girl, she would have been named Zélie after Courbet's sister. So yeah, I've spent some time with Courbet in my mind.
As part of the 100 founding gifts, the Singers also donated a group of Tibetan paintings, and these are very complex images. The Tibetan Buddhism is one that it sort of borders on what we call sometimes esoteric Buddhism. And by that, what we mean is that there is an enormous canon of different saints, sub-deities, and bodhisattvas. And the Singers acquired these through an artist friend of theirs named Jacob Doyevard, not Jacob, Willem Doyevard, who traveled abroad to Asia. And so the Singers have this sub-interest in collecting area of Asian art. And I wanted to point that out because they really had this sense of worldliness, of urbanity, of sophistication that they wanted to bring to Hagerstown. And here's a photograph of the Schreiber Gallery with these two paintings on display. The one over here of the 84 Great Saints, which is a gouache on canvas. It's over here on the left, and a work that actually hopefully we'll get to it tonight. It's the Lafayette by Wayland Bartlett. The equestrian Lafayette is sort of plopped there.
That's exactly what I think of to go with my Asian. It is, he looks, like he's riding through to battle right through there.
Yes. And here's one of another deity by the name of Samvara. And this is a fierce protective Buddhist deity. So they're very interesting. We could do a separate talk on these, and at some point I probably will, because we have a number of them in the collection. I'm bringing them in to show you the diversity of the original holdings. Under Medford, we also had at the museum some fabulous exhibitions that were borrowed from New York galleries, such as works by Diego Rivera, his famous lithograph called Zapata, an important figure in Mexican history and Mexican Revolution, and also Jose Clemente Orozco, who's very renowned for his mural paintings. This one called The Elevated. which is likely of an elevated train station in Chicago in 1928. And another work that was included in that was Orozco's Wounded Soldier. That's today in the Cleveland Museum of Art. We also featured photography. And I mention this because we continue in the tradition of exhibiting photography with our upcoming Brassai exhibition. And this goes all the way back to the 1930s, where we exhibited works by Edward Weston, shown here, but also abstract avant-garde pieces by Man Ray and documentary style photographs by Bernice Abbott, an important woman photographer who, with her camera, captured New York of the 1930s very well.
When I see these images that you share, it makes me, want to, it would be very fun to recreate some of these. I mean, they look like really strong exhibitions that they would be wonderful to see today. So wonderful that they were here in Hagerstown at the time.
Absolutely, yes. This exhibition that came here was circulated by the Museum of Modern Art. Museum of Modern Art was very new still then, and it had everybody from Ansel Adams to Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, Man Ray, and also Paul Strand. So very interesting. And then under Richard Medford, this very important thing happens. The museum purchases its first painting. And this is one of our greatest treasures. It's by Thomas Moran, the Hudson River School artist, who is renowned for depicting the American West, but who paints this fabulous scene of industry and of pollution, Lower Manhattan from Communipaw, New Jersey. And it's certainly one of my favorites in the collection. And yes, it is truly a show-stopping painting. And we wouldn't have been able to purchase it without the assistance of, back then, a $10,000 request from this man, Martin Borgord, who was an artist and a friend of the Singers. And in fact, this is William Singer's portrait of Martin. It's in the Singer-Lauren Museum. Martin was a good friend of the Singers, and he was involved with the founding and the original operation of our museum. And he left this request for the purchase of art, but also for museum operating costs. So this was a fabulous purchase, and it was started by this guy, Richard Medford, who's shown here in the Baltimore Sun magazine. After he left our museum, he went on a fellowship at Johns Hopkins University, and he traveled in Africa, which is why the title is With Medford in Darkest Baltimore. And this is talking about his life after coming back from Africa.
I'll just add, for those of you who are here, that we are working on a series of lectures for this anniversary year that celebrate particular pieces in the collection. And so Tim Berenger from Yale is going to talk about Moran. He's calling it Thomas Moran's New World Symphony. You look at this Moran, and I really only knew, I had done an exhibition in Pittsburgh of Moran watercolors, which were Western. So I really wasn't familiar with the rest of his work. And when I saw this Eastern landscape that's kind of part landscape, part genre painting, right? Because he's got people working and going about their lives in this. I swear every square inch of this canvas is beautiful. I say I could look at any bit of it, but you also really see Moran's admiration for Turner in this. It's just a fabulous painting. So I'm really excited about having a talk just dedicated to this painting sometime in November, I think. We don't have the date nailed down yet, but everyone should try to attend that because he's a great speaker. It should be fabulous.
I'm looking forward to that as well. So the Moran finally arrives in the transition to John Richard Kraft, who is the director who succeeds Medford. He's director from 1940 to 49. And again, with funds from the Borgord bequest, John Kraft goes and he purchases our first Old Master paintings. This one here by Giovanni Massone, who is from Liguria. It's the province in which Genoa is today. It's the capital of Liguria. And he purchases this at Park Burnett galleries, Park Burnett auctions, actually, along with a painting that we no longer have, unfortunately, called Constantine Before the Walls of Jerusalem, which was part of an Italian Renaissance chest. It was one painted panel. It was oil on wood. So he purchases these together at the same auction in 1941. And this is actually our earliest painting in the collection. Had we still had Constantine before the walls of Jerusalem, it would be the earliest one, but we don't anymore. And this is a page from the auction catalog at the time with John Craft's notes and scribblings on it as he was getting ready to bid both on what was then called the Paolo Cello School piece and the Giovanni Massone Saints Mary Magdalene and Paul. And here is that painting. It's really outstanding. It's hanging in our Schreiber Gallery. And while it's from the Renaissance, it really retains more of a medieval quality to it because the figures are a bit stiffer. We can even see the gilding here in the halos and also the sort of more abstracted rendition of the clouds and the landscape elements. And that's because you're talking about a composition made in northern Italy, which had more proximity to northern Europe. So this work has more influence from Northern Renaissance art than you might see in something that's done down in Tuscany, in Florence. And I should point out that it was a painting that the painting we have is only one panel from an original triptych. And the work itself is very rare because there aren't very many Giovanni Massone paintings still remaining. Most of them are in Italy, and there is one down at the Bass Museum of Art in Miami, but they are few and far between to find, so we're quite fortunate to have this in our collection. The work that we don't have anymore is, instead of it being done by the famous painter Paolo Cello, it was likely done by these artists Apollonio di Giovanni di Tommaso and another artist named Marco del Buono Giamberti. So as I mentioned before, this was a scene that was from a large casket. It was deaccessioned and sold though in 1969. And you can see the Giovanni Massone and the work that I was showing you before from the Italian chest. The Massone is hanging right over here in the Schreiber Gallery circa 1941 in an exhibition of Italian Renaissance art on loan from the Silberman and Newton galleries in New York City. And I should point out that the display of old master art that we have at the museum, we still honor this tradition that was started by Dr. Craft back in the 40s. He had thought that this space was very well suited to exhibiting European art from the medieval all the way through the 17th centuries, and we've continued with that. Under John Craft, we also made advances in the collection, acquiring works for the collection by Asian artists, such as this one that you may remember from some of my programming on Guanyin and her attendant. It was also on view in the Seldom Seen exhibition last summer. And very importantly, the acquisition of the Diana of the Chase by Anna Hyatt Huntington in 1941 for the occasion of the 10th anniversary. And this is another one of those, as Sarah was saying before, a real showstopper piece. It has become the icon of the Museum of Fine Arts. And it's on view in the rotunda, which was originally exposed to the elements, but today it's encased in glass. And this is such a graceful sculpture. It is just wonderful. It's part of the museum's, fully part of the museum's identity. And it shows her at the moment where she's let that arrow just spring straight from her bow. And you can see the response of one of her hunting dogs down below to the actions that the goddess is making. Just a stunning.
Really lovely. It's so beautifully sited in the museum. If you haven't physically been to our building, you need to get there because it is a moment, you know, where people audibly gasp when they see Diana framed. And then if it's a beautiful day, you see, you know, blue sky and roses and the lake. It's just really beautiful.
It's stunning. And it was part of this idea originally done by Haydn Shepherd architects that there would be a sculpture placed in the rotunda. This is one of their preliminary drawings for the original museum. And that certainly that vision was realized with this gift of the artist, which was negotiated through some of Anna Singer's connections, as well as the directors. And then in 1949, John Craft oversees the expansion of the museum to have two new galleries, our Bowman Concert Gallery on the right and our Singer Gallery off on the left. So this was a major project and a huge step forward for the Art Museum. Now, leading up to that, there was a special exhibition of William Singer's paintings held in 1946. In these photographs here show you they're a mix of both that 1946 show and also the 1949 opening. in which many important people were there, including Anna herself. She came back for the 1946 opening, and then she was back for the 1949 grand party in November of that year to welcome many different people. Here's a great photo of her sitting in one of these Renaissance-style chairs. And over here is our bust of Lincoln by John Gutson Borglum, who carved Mount Rushmore, and one of our founding trustees, Henry Holtzapfel, here on the right-hand side. And this shows you how the museum was installed back then for Williams' retrospective exhibition. Also part of that year were some really key gifts. More paintings by William Singer in 1949, our Equestrian Lafayette by Paul Wayland Bartlett, fabulous American Impressionist paintings from the Singers. These are all gifts to the Singers by Richard Emil Miller, and then also their friend Martin Borgård here, the Norwegian Sailor, which is a really great painting. Salt of the earth fellow here, this mariner. So some really outstanding additions were made. And the Lafayette is particularly important because it was commissioned for as a gift in exchange for and means of thanking France for the gift of the Statue of Liberty back in 1885. Today, this large-scale sculpture, the one that we have, is a small-scale version of what would become a huge work destined for Cours la Reine in central Paris, where it's displayed today. As we move into the 1950s, we have another very important director who makes many strides for the museum, a man named Bruce Atchison, who was director from 1950 to 1964. Bruce brought many new acquisitions in European, American, and Asian art to the museum. He would expand the reach of our audiences by going on television and broadcasting discussions of works from the collection, such as this portrait that was done as a copy after a famous portrait of Rembrandt that's over in the Burrell collection in Scotland. At the time, though, it was thought to be a Rembrandt. And Bruce would often go on TV and do these programs that were meant to reach new audiences, to sort of get the name of the museum out there, to make it more national. And he was very successful. Some highlights from his time included Gottfried Schalken's self-portrait from 1694, Erasmus Quilinus's Christ that you see here in the center, and then also Timoteo Viti's self-portrait, a Renaissance one from the year 1509. And the Schalken is really an outstanding work. I'm just showing you some details of it. It's just wonderful. I love the light in this painting, the way that it reflects off the artist. It shows off his self-confidence. Schalken he was from the Netherlands originally, but he went on to establish himself in his practice, moving eventually to London and serving King William III. So much so was this.
Candlelight is his thing.
What's that?
Candlelight is his thing.
Yes, it was his specialty. And this composition really became so popular that he marketed it through a series of mezzotins. This one that was done by John Smith after the painting. And you can see how the light here in the mezzotint is accentuated, and it's showing off that partially broken column. The artist is connecting himself also with ancient sculpture and the great tradition of the Greco-Roman world, showing that he too can both emulate but also surpass the ancients in his painting. And it's neat to compare.
I'm largely remaining quiet because I know you have a lot of really wonderful slides to get through. So I won't interrupt unless there's something really key for me to say.
Well, I'm going to go through here because there is a lot to cover. This one is another one of our favorites, the Thomas Cole study for the Voyage of Life. It is a study.
Exquisite.
It's just exquisite, this one. This is a commission, and you may know it. And one thing Sarah will often tell me, and I'm sure she can also add to it, is look at the way that the wings are painted in this, both in the study and in the finished version. It's just remarkable.
I don't think I've ever seen more beautiful wings in any artwork. I mean, the iridescence, and they're beautiful. They're like jewels. And this is actually not on display right now. And I didn't see it in person until we were taking some folks through the vault a couple of months ago. And again, it was one of those, stunning moments of like, wow, wow, what a fabulous piece this is. And such a, we have a fantastic American collection. And so this is just one example. And the Moran is another example. And, the Hudson River School works, of course, Cole being considered the founder of the Hudson River School. It's a great collection.
It is indeed. And what Cole did is he did this as a study for, it appeared with Cole's other studies for the series, The Voyage of Life, which was originally commissioned by the New York banker Samuel Ward, who wanted to hang them in his personal picture gallery to set a moral example for his daughter, actually. So it has a very interesting story, and each painting that's down in the National Gallery of Art depicts a different part of the development of an adult, from all the way from childhood to old age and death. And they're really amazing paintings. If you ever have a chance to go down to the NGA, they're really among their pride and joy of the American collections. And they're enormous canvases as well. And here you can see the section of that painting for which ours is a study. He's trying to work that out here with the boat. There's all kinds of allegorical symbolism here in these paintings that you could, again, devote even more time to focusing on them specifically. I actually did a Curator's Den video that I encourage you to look at, in which I go into more detail about them. It's a very fascinating series. He also brought our Frederick Church, which was a purchase in 1962. And we get to some very famous pieces as well. Edward Steichen, brought in by Bruce Atchison in 1953, a rare oil on canvas painting. Before the artist devoted himself entirely to photography, he actually destroyed most of his paintings, which was very sad. He decided that he really wanted to try to erase that aspect of his creative expression. And the Yellow Moon, which is very poetic, almost musical kind of picture, is a rare survivor of that. A very different kind of painting acquired directly from the artist by Bruce Atchison is our very famous Oculus, The Oculist by Norman Rockwell, which Sarah had conserved. And we will be putting this back on view in the Kirstein Gallery as part of our installation.
I like personal credit for that. I don't deserve personal credit for it. Obviously, I'm not a conservator, but it was deinstalled for the Bernini and Roman Baroque exhibition because of the way we installed that show. And it really, I hate to say this, but it's such a popular painting that people can't resist poking at it. It really needed to get behind glazing for its own safety. And it needed a little bit of in painting as well. So it was a good way to make use of the time that it wasn't on view. And it's our anniversary year, so we'll make a fuss over it when we rehang it. And if anybody knows a good funder out there to hook us up with, I really want to do a little book just on the Rockwell. It is so popular. I think it would be a fun project and sell like hotcakes.
It's an icon of the museum, beloved. And we will return to the painting and talk a bit more about its context and the story surrounding it at a later date. And Bruce Atchison also brought in important works by artists of the 8 group as well. This is one of my favorites, called Jerome Myers, The Grandmother. And the 8 were concerned with the gritty aspects of urban life in early 20th century America, which would be very much the polar opposite of artists like Norman Rockwell or even Edward Steichen. As we move into the 1960s, we had 2 directors, this one being Alan Dubois, who one of his significant acquisitions was a Thomas Sully portrait of Daniel Webster, the famous American politician. This is a great painting. It's on view in the Smith Gallery. And what's great about it is you get to see Thomas Sully's working process. It is unfinished. He has the head worked out of the politician, but this part of the work is not completed. So you get to see how the artist applied the pigment to the surface of the canvas and even how he prepared it. So it's really a unique acquisition. We don't have many things like this in the collection, maybe one other portrait that's in this state or stage. Here's Alan Dubois at the time with Ted Kennedy and a museum donor named Louis Schechter. So they had a photo op with Ted Kennedy at the time, And then also with Governor of Maryland, Governor Tawes, and the painting. The museum was very proud of it back then in 1965.
And I will say all our friends from the NGA flocked over to it when they were visiting us a week and a half or so ago. So it is a really, really appealing portrait.
Yes. And Mr. Schechter was the donor of the painting. So it has a very interesting story surrounding it if we go into have more time to go into it. And then in 1969, under the director John Petty, he brought other important American paintings to the museum, including our iconic and fabulous William Merritt Chase still life with copper kettle and fish. It's really the light in this painting is just amazing how the table here picks up on the colors of the kettle itself, and they sort of merge together. How William Merritt Chase captured the scales of the fish. It's like they are still alive on the table.
They are some of the most beautiful fish. Beautiful dying fish.
And our iconic Daniel Ridgeway Knight painting. Very rare in Daniel Ridgeway Knight's work, the American who would go abroad and paint French peasant women in the countryside. He was a Civil War veteran, and Daniel Knight depicts here a group of Union soldiers protecting citizens in a barn. They're seeking refuge, likely from Confederate soldiers. This work is another one that I focused on in one of my videos, in which you have these figures over here on the right with a priest, and then on the left, this African-American woman. It's a bit obscured here with her child, who are sort of taking refuge inside the barn too. So you have issues not only of the war, but also of race. And this is on the verge of the Emancipation Proclamation, the time in which this is being depicted, likely about 1863. And also John Petty acquired our fabulous Robert Henry portrait of Michael.
Sweet.
As we move into the 1970s, we come up to some very important acquisitions made by then director Henry Coton and curator who worked with Mr. Coton, Robert Presler. And this is a photograph that shows him with the Metzger gift in 1981. This was a major acquisition of both medieval and European 19th century art at the museum. But perhaps most noteworthy of the Coton-Presler time period were the major acquisitions and advances they made for the collection in then contemporary art. This included works by Jasper Johns, prints such as Viola, in which he's exploring the use of text and also abstract forms in this lithograph. This one hasn't been on view for a long time. Robert Indiana's Renowned Love, and then also Roy Lichtenstein's Still Life with Picture and Flowers, which is a fabulous pop art image. And the Love is really iconic. Here's the sculptural form of the composition done in 1970, one of them for the JFK Plaza in Philadelphia. So this is really iconic. You may remember when Sarah and I actually brought this into our February Let's Talk Art when we were looking at love themes from the collection. Other key acquisitions that were made at the time include Jim Dine, Marisol, and this is a very unusual one because it's a drawing, it's figurative, and it looks nothing like most of the work that we have. Jim Dine, by the way, is a pop artist. Marisol, a very important feminist artist. This work was on view for our Women Artists exhibition last summer. And it's her commentary on Paul Revere's Ride with the title called The English Are Coming. Sort of erotic, but also colorful work. And then also in the 1970s, we acquired our first work by an African-American, by Sam Gilliam, the color field artist from Washington, D.C. And this work called Wave, which is another lithograph, whereas the Marisol is a drawing. And I just wanted to bring in here, Sarah, how you mentioned.
Oh, that's so sweet of you to do that, Daniel. So this is the Marisol that I grew up with. You know, I remember going to the Albright Knox as a very small kid because my father was the director of the Buffalo Museum of Science and died when I was 5. So any memories I have of being at the Albright Knox with my dad are very early indeed. But I so know this work. So.
And it is a strange work, I must say, the way that she sort of flattened the anatomical forms of this
The blocky
baby.
baby, yeah.
Yes, and it's satirical, it's witty, it's ironic, and it's very different from what she did in the large drawing that we have here. This is huge, this drawing.
Yeah,
That she
very
did
big drawing, yeah.
of Paul Revere, where the figures very erotically take on the form of a horse, and then this other woman is holding onto a gun.
I will say though, while the baby doll is gigantic and blocky, you can imagine it being scaled down and being like a real piece of folk art, right? That you could actually carry and play with if that was the only thing you had.
Yes.
It has that feel.
And in the 1980s, our director of 21 years, Jean Woods, was appointed in 1982, and she made significant acquisitions for the collection over her long tenure, which ranged all the way from art glass Alot's vase down here, which is on view in our Reinhardt Gallery, to works from the enormous Miller collection, which was donated in 1991. Here's a landscape
yeah.
by Theodore Rousseau.
Rousseau, sorry.
Arthur Parton.
Ours wrong.
Jean-Charles Cazin were part of the Miller gift. And as you have recognized by now, under Jean, our Joshua Johnson paintings entered the collection.
So yeah, really, we've got the Joshua Johnson exhibition up right now that we built around those important acquisitions. And we're doing a Joseph Holston exhibition next year. So really wonderful things that we've been able to continue. And people love the Holston. I mean, a lot of the time when I go onto Instagram and look at things that are geotagged to the museum, people are posing in front of the Holston. It's great. And Jean, I think, is on the call here, so she can tell us in the chat if she has any great memories to share or anything, because it's wonderful that I saw her name on the participant list. So really, she gave the museum a lot of her life, so we're all grateful for that.
Indeed. And then under Joe Ruzicka and when Ann Wagner was curator at the museum, we had a number of gifts for the 75th anniversary, including the Frank Stella, which was an important acquisition for the representation of minimalist art in the collection. From that to our Pierre Mignard, which hangs today in the Schreiber Gallery, an important French Baroque painting, to a Warrington Colescott print down below, 2 Japanese prints of the ukiyo-e tradition that you see down here on the right-hand side. May look familiar to you from some of the videos I've done on Japanese art. And that's just a close-up of the Frank Stella, Les Indes Galantes, which is based off of an opera composed by the French Baroque composer Jean-Philippe Rameau. And it has a very interesting story. Frank Stella, always interested in color and texture and the juxtaposition of color and geometric form in his compositions. And we come up to Rebecca Massey Lane, our director of 12 years, who recently retired, and she made very significant acquisitions and contributions to the museum, including this print by Jacob Lawrence from the John Brown series that you see up here. From that, all the way to the landmark acquisition of the Perry collection in 2018. The Perrys were important benefactors of the museum, collectors, and they collected everything from medieval manuscripts to Albrecht Dürer prints to works by Mary Cassatt, Fernand Léger, and also Richard Diebenkorn. So it's a collection of over 300 pieces spanning the centuries. And we come full circle here to also some acquisitions that when I arrived by Mama Can Sing and Papa Can Blow by Faith Ringgold, and more recently some old master prints that were acquired from a collector named John O'Brien and his wife Sylvie. And these 2 prints here by Ottavio Leone are currently on view in our corridor gallery, so I encourage you to see them. And to the present moment, me and Sarah are very excited to announce the acquisition of some important work by Dennis Farber, who worked in the Polaroid format and also in painting Polaroid photographs, such as this one here, Oaxaca, Mexico.
just arrived yesterday, and really, he's an interesting artist who taught at MICA for quite a long time, has a really wonderful CV, but I love the weird things he does. You know, he worked with large format Polaroids, had several, I think, sort of residencies with the big Polaroid camera that they had in Boston, and did these really interesting things, playing with time and layering of past and present, and that's a painted photograph on the right there, which it's just it's really beautiful. The texture, you know, looking at it this size on a screen does nothing in comparison to the real thing. So we thought he was really interesting, poetic, evocative work, and we are always looking for people with Maryland roots. We love to do internationally significant things. I keep saying it's fabulous that we can bring the world to this corner of Maryland. We can bring Baroque art, but we also can dig in and explore Joshua Johnson, who spent his life painting in Baltimore. And we do take seriously our sort of obligation to regional art and artists. So I love having the Dennis Farbers.
Yes. And we also are looking forward to an acquisition of works by a lesser known photographer named Joseph Franklin, which should be arriving at the museum soon. He spent much time in Africa, photographing people of different tribes and cultures there. This, while Sarah and I have been working together, we've also received more wonderful art glass donations from Michael Merson. Specifically here, this beautiful.
It's so delightful. It is so delightful. I don't know if you can enlarge that to show it off enough, but it's really, you know, I don't think of myself as somebody who likes kind of stuff. You know, I've occasionally said the awful thing, sculpture is what you back into when you look at a painting. But but there's always exceptions to the rule, and good work is good work, right? And that piece of glass is just so beautiful and delightful, just pure pleasure.
This is amazing, and we'll have to put this on view soon so that we can share it with everybody. And here is a painting by an artist named Shelby Shackleford, who worked for some time in Maryland, but also in other parts of the country, I believe Massachusetts. And so we're very happy with the advances that we've been making. And this sort of is a summary and an overview of what the museum has been doing art-wise and also in other areas for the past 90 years.
And that was a long presentation for those of you who stuck with us, but really fun. I completely lost track of time because I've been here 14 months now, but I'm still learning, and it's, you know, it's kind of a layering process. So I hear it once and some of it sticks, and I hear it a second time and a little more sticks. So I'm getting better, but this was really, really useful. And so I appreciate that, Daniel. That was, I think, fun for you to put together as well, but really wonderful tour through our history. So it's been over an hour. I don't want to keep people very long, but if there are questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat or the Q&A. I'll go ahead and say the goodbyes, and then I'll check the chat, which is basically that our next Let's Talk Art is October 21st. And I think what we're doing there is looking at the new installation, Bauke de Vries War and Pieces, which explores the history of porcelain as a commodity through tablescape, essentially, a gigantic 24-foot long installation that is like a huge centerpiece, but it's also staged as a battle between porcelain, plastic, and sugar. It's a lot to talk about because we can talk about the history of porcelain. We can talk about international trade. We can bring in things from our collection, which Daniel has done, as he is really good at doing, is pulling things out of our permanent collection that complement our temporary exhibitions. So we have some porcelain out on display now that people haven't seen in quite a while, if ever. So we're going to talk about that in October, and it should be fun. And maybe we'll even have like videos of banquets and things like that to share with you as well. I don't see any questions, but I do see somebody said it was a delightful presentation. So we're glad that you enjoyed it, and everybody learned a little bit more about the museum tonight, and hopefully we'll get here in person so that you can enjoy it and be delighted one-on-one. Thanks so much for being with us, and thanks, Daniel.
Yep. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Sarah.
Bye-bye.
Good night.